Now this brings us to the Muppet of the month, and this is so such a rich vein of irony, and also actually this really demonstrates a missed opportunity on the part of those who are complaining to distance themselves from certain ideologies. I'm talking about the marketing surrounding the upcoming latest installment in the Wolfenstein computer game franchise. Wolfenstein: The New Colossus, which follows up to the New Order, which came out a couple of years ago, is simply the latest in a long line of Wolfenstein games. The first of which came out in the 80s, I do believe, and it was one of the first-person shooters. So you get, in other words, the perspective on the screen. You see your hands, as it were, as you're running along through a 3D world. And in the first game, famously or infamously, there was controversy when, in certain versions of that game, eventually you come up to Hitler. You get to basically shoot Hitler. And Wolfenstein has continued. It's developed over the years, and the latest version sees essentially an alternate post-war history where the Nazis have successfully invaded America. And this is where a particular tweet comes in, is it not?
It is. Um, as you say, the Wolfenstein franchise has been going for a long, long time. The latest installment is set in this counterfactual 1960s America,
Hmm.
and part of the marketing was a video showing Nazis apparently marching through an American town, and the accompanying this was a tweet, hashtag no more Nazis, hashtag Wolf2, with the line, make America Nazi free again. Now, certain people have noticed that making America Nazi free again is quite close to a certain slogan that was used by the Trump campaign,
Hmm.
i.e., make America great again. And there's been a sense of humour fail, shall we say, where certain people have assumed that it's accusing Trump supporters of being Nazis. I can't think why they would ever think that anybody who was a Nazi would ever want to vote for somebody like Donald Trump. Anyway, that appears to be the situation. I mean, to be honest, I think this is absolutely smack bang centre in American popular culture, going right back to the original Wolfenstein, and almost contemporaneously with that, a certain character, a certain Professor Jones, if I remember rightly, who I think has a line of dialogue along the lines of "Nazis, I hate these guys."
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah, exactly. Indiana Jones, and in that sense, Nazis are they are straw men of computer games. They are the
Absolutely.
things, and comic books, and and film. There is that element of actually this shouldn't be such a big deal. That they've kind of become an element. There's an element of that, but also this also demonstrates actually a knee-jerk reaction from some people who simply do not understand the context of Wolfenstein, and are actually they're actually probably a bit too nervous about their own political views. Because frankly, if I was someone who was right wing, the first thing I would say would be, so what? I'm not a Nazi. Like, fine, shoot Nazis. But actually, we're in this sort of weird situation where people are. There have even actually been some people who are saying, well, those poor Nazis were shooting those Nazis, and that's just their cultural expression, and it's a weird situation to be in, and yet it's one that's been this computer game franchise has actually been going since 1981. It's just Muppets, just utter Muppets, but also. I think, as ever, seems to be the case, and actually this also goes back to the UNESCO story we were talking about at the beginning of this month's watching brief. Um, we're in a situation where reactionary politics and reactionary cultural, geopolitical decisions and associations uh, become extraordinarily potent extraordinarily quickly. I mean, even a couple of years ago, I mean, back in 2014, when Wolfenstein: The New Order was released, there wasn't this sort of reaction, this sort of high-profile reaction to the idea of a computer game where you, as a protagonist, are hunting and killing Nazis. It's a sign of the times, and I think that's the thing I find most frustrating and most unfortunate
it's
about this.
yeah, it is a sometimes. I mean, it's interesting that um, the Bethesda Software, who are making the game, their vice president marketing and public relations, a guy called Pete Hines,
Hmm.
was absolutely unashamed about it. He told the website Games Industry, that quote, "We don't feel it's a reach for us to say Nazis are bad and un-American," and then continued, "We're not worried about being on the right side of history here."
No,
You know,
no.
you say, unless you're a Nazi, most people would say actually Nazis are a pretty bad thing. Not the Nazi ideology is a pretty bad thing. And okay, you can argue whether any first-person shooter makes it too easy to put you in the place of being able to kill somebody.
Hmm.
There is an argument there.
Hmm. Hmm.
But what this is ignoring is the fact that Wolfenstein, it's satirical, guys. You
Yeah,
know,
yeah,
it's taking that trope from popular culture and having fun with it.
yeah.
It's not meant to be serious.
No, and that's
It's a
partly
game.
because at every turn especially in this sort of rebooted franchise since 2014, these Nazis have extraordinary scientific capabilities. You know, they've really ramped up things like robotics, and they've gone to the moon and all that kind of thing. It is ridiculous in many respects. But I suppose actually, just in the interest of not so much fairness, but I suppose in the interest of some element of balance, just trying to see someone else's perspective on this. You can see why, for example, there's a tweet here saying, "LOL, are you trying to send the message that Trump supporters are Nazis?" There is that angle, isn't there, here? In so much as, yes, it is satire, but taking the Trump slogan and it is taking the Trump slogan. It's not an
Oh, very
accident.
deliberately, yes.
Yeah, and linking it with Nazism, you can see why actually. There, I know people who have voted Trump who aren't anywhere near being Nazi. They
No,
simply are heartfelt Republicans.
yeah.
You can see why that might upset some people.
You can, although I think that there's you can turn that around. You can say that no, of course, not every Trump supporter is a Nazi, but you can't see many Nazis who have voted for Hillary Clinton. You
No.
know,
Mm,
and
mm,
and it is undoubtedly the case that people with an overt Nazi ideology have been marching on the streets of the United States this year, possibly emboldened um, by the presence of Donald Trump in the White House. It's not saying Donald Trump's a Nazi. It's not saying that everybody who voted for him is Nazi. But it is a political phenomenon. But I think we've been here
so it's
before.
a fingers and thumbs thing then. Not all fingers are thumbs, but all thumbs are fingers, kind of thing.
You could put it like that. I mean, we've also been here before. I mean, do you remember that there was a row over it wasn't about Nazis, but when the most recent Grand Theft Auto came out, there was
Hmm.
the usual, oh god, it's too violent, it's whatever. And again, it's ignoring the fact that GTA has certain satirical elements about American consumerism and popular culture. You
Hmm.
know, we're forgetting that games developers don't just develop games in isolation. They're part of a popular culture. They reflect that popular culture in the same way that any other creative person does.
Mm, mm, mm.
And that they those attitudes, those ideas, those jokes will find their way into games like Wolfenstein, and that's exactly how it should be.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and also as well, it's also worth highlighting the layers of irony here as well. There is a certain humour failure on the part of some people, a certain context lack of awareness on the
Yeah.
part of some people. But also here, for example, we have a tweet. I won't say from who. That says, "I dislike how you phrase this. You guys might want to make a statement that you guys don't hate Trump or freedom." Whereas they're enacting, as it were, freedom of speech by making a piece of computer game uh, software, or indeed even art, if you want to go that far, that is all about alternate histories, Nazis in America. What does that mean? In some ways, they're on the cusp of freedom, like
Yeah.
being able to do that and actually stepping out and saying it. So it's interesting how you also get this sort of butting heads with a form of nationalism that sees actually, funnily enough, um, uh, limiting freedom of speech as freedom.
Yeah,
It's interesting, but nonetheless, an awful lot of muppetry going on around this topic. So thought we'd
absolutely.
highlight it.